The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday afternoon, turning the streets of downtown Toronto into rivers of gray light and shadow. Clara Bennett stood under the narrow awning of a coffee shop on King Street, watching the city dissolve into watercolor through the downpour. She clutched her canvas tote bag closer, protecting the stack of ungraded essays inside, 23 third-graders' attempts at writing about their heroes. She'd promised to return them tomorrow, but the weather had other plans. At 32, Clara had learned to read the rhythms of the city the way she read her students' faces each morning, the subtle shifts that told her when someone needed patience, when the day would be difficult, when grace was required. Toronto in October was a study in transitions, summer's warmth giving way to autumn's chill, the trees along University Avenue bleeding gold and crimson, the light changing earlier each evening as if the city itself was drawing inward, preparing for winter's long silence. She checked her phone. 4:47 p.m. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and she had a bus to catch, the 501 Queen streetcar that would take her east to her small apartment in Leslieville. Her friend Mira had texted earlier, "Wine tonight? You look like you need it." Clara had declined, citing the essays, but truthfully she'd been declining a lot lately. Teaching was fulfilling but exhausting, and lately she'd felt a particular weariness that had nothing to do with her students. It was the adults, if she was honest. The parents who emailed at midnight demanding grade changes. The colleagues who treated kindness as naivety. The city itself, which seemed to move faster each year, everyone rushing past each other with headphones and smartphones, eyes down, hearts closed. She'd chosen teaching because she believed in people, in their capacity for growth and goodness. But lately, that belief felt theoretical, something she told herself but didn't quite feel. The rain eased slightly, shifting from downpour to steady drizzle. Clara took her chance, stepping out from the awning and joining the flow of pedestrians moving through the gray afternoon. She walked quickly, her flats splashing through puddles, her hair already plastered to her forehead despite her umbrella's best efforts. The bus stop was 2 blocks north, and if she hurried, she might catch the 5 p.m. That's when she saw it. The wallet lay on the bench at the bus stop, half hidden in the shadow of the shelter. Brown leather, worn soft with age and use, darker where the rain had soaked through. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. The bench was in an awkward spot, tucked against the shelter's back wall where commuters rarely sat. But Clara had developed a teacher's eye for things out of place, the backpack left under a desk, the lunchbox forgotten on the playground, the small casualties of a hurried world. She glanced around. The bus stop was surprisingly empty for this time of day, just an older woman checking her phone and a young man with headphones, neither paying attention to anything beyond their own concerns. Clara approached the bench slowly, as if the wallet might disappear if she moved too quickly. She picked it up, expecting it to be heavier, more substantial. Instead it felt light, almost hollow. The leather was quality, the kind that ages rather than deteriorates, developing character with time. No logo, no embellishments, just simple craftsmanship from an era when things were made to last. Clara opened it carefully, mindful of the rain still falling, sheltering it under her umbrella. Empty. No cash, which didn't surprise her, anyone who'd found it before her would have taken that. But no credit cards either, no driver's license, no health card or library card or any of the usual detritus of modern life. Just 2 things, a photograph and a folded piece of paper. The photograph was small, the kind printed from a disposable camera or early digital print, its edges soft with age. It showed a little boy, maybe 7 or 8, holding a paper airplane. He was mid-laugh, captured in that unself-conscious joy unique to childhood. Behind him, slightly out of focus, was a park, trees and grass and what looked like an old stone fountain. The boy wore a striped shirt and had dark hair that fell across his forehead. Something about his expression, pure delight, untouched by the complications of adult life, made Clara's chest tighten. She unfolded the note carefully. The paper was thick, expensive stationery yellowed slightly with time. The handwriting was careful, almost calligraphic. Return this to where kindness still lives. Clara read the sentence 3 times, turning the paper over to see if there was more. There wasn't. Just those 7 words in elegant script, and below them, faintly, what might have been the ghost of a water stain or perhaps an old tear. She stood there in the rain, commuters flowing around her like water around a stone, and felt something shift in her chest. Was this a prank? Some kind of social experiment or art project? Toronto was full of that kind of thing, flash mobs and guerrilla art installations and well-meaning attempts to make people think about their relationships to strangers. But something about the wallet felt too genuine, too worn, too old to be part of someone's semester project in sociology. The 501 streetcar approached, its bell clanging. Clara looked up, then back down at the wallet in her hands. She made a decision that surprised her even as she made it. She stepped back from the curb and let the streetcar pass. The older woman boarded, the young man with headphones stayed, still lost in whatever music pulsed through his earbuds. Clara tucked the wallet carefully into her tote bag, protecting it from the rain with her stack of essays, and began walking. Not toward home, but toward the small research library branch on Richmond Street. If she was going to follow this strange trail, she needed to do it properly. The library was warm and quiet, smelling of old books and coffee from the small cafe near the entrance. Clara found a corner table and spread out her findings, the wallet, the photograph, the note. She took out her phone and began searching. Return this to where kindness still lives. What did that mean? A place? An institution? A metaphor? She started with the photograph, studying the background. The park looked old, not modern playground equipment but traditional landscaping, mature trees, stone structures. The fountain in the background had classical lines, the kind you didn't see in newer developments. She zoomed in on the photo, trying to make out details. There, on the boy's striped shirt, partially visible, was what looked like a logo. She enhanced the image as much as her phone would allow. A small emblem, circular, with what might be a ship or boat. She searched Toronto Park stone fountain, then added vintage, then tried different combinations. Nothing quite matched. An hour passed. The library began to empty as closing time approached. Clara's eyes hurt from staring at her screen, and she was no closer to understanding the wallet's origin. She was about to give up when she noticed something she'd missed before. In the photograph's background, barely visible, was a street sign. She zoomed in until the image pixelated, but she could just make out 2 letters, Q and U. Queen Street. It had to be. Toronto's Queen Street stretched across the city, but the photograph's architecture suggested the older section, probably Queen West, where Victorian and Edwardian buildings still stood between modern developments. Clara gathered her things and left the library just as they were announcing closing time. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and smelling of wet pavement and autumn leaves. The street lights were coming on, casting pools of golden light along Richmond Street. She walked to the nearest subway station, her mind turning over the puzzle. At home, she made tea and sat at her small kitchen table, the wallet in front of her. Her apartment was modest, a 1-bedroom in a converted house, with hardwood floors she'd never quite managed to keep clean and windows that looked out onto a street lined with maple trees. The walls were covered with her students' artwork and photographs from better times, Clara with her parents before they'd retired to Nova Scotia, Clara at her university graduation, Clara and Mira laughing at a summer barbecue. She picked up the photograph again, studying the boy's face. Who was he? And more importantly, who had left this wallet for someone to find? Return this to where kindness still lives. The more she thought about it, the more it felt less like instructions and more like a question, a test, perhaps, or a wish. As if someone was asking the universe, does kindness still exist? Will someone prove it? Clara didn't sleep well that night. She kept thinking about the wallet, about the boy in the photograph, about whoever had carefully placed it on that bus stop bench hoping someone would care enough to investigate. She thought about her own growing cynicism, her exhaustion with a world that seemed increasingly transactional. When had she stopped believing in goodness? When had she started seeing compassion as quaint rather than essential? The next morning, Clara called in sick, the first time she'd done so in 3 years. She felt guilty about leaving her class with a substitute, but something about the wallet felt urgent, as if it had been waiting a long time for someone to find it, and she couldn't bear to make it wait longer. She took the Queen streetcar west, watching the city change through the window. Toronto was a city of neighborhoods, each with its own character, the gleaming financial towers downtown giving way to Victorian row houses in Trinity Bellwoods, then the artistic energy of Ossington, the Portuguese community around Dufferin. She got off at Bellwoods Park and began walking, the photograph on her phone screen, comparing it to her surroundings. The park had changed over the decades, new paths, different plantings, modern playground equipment where older structures once stood. But bones remained, the slope of the land, the mature trees, and there, partially hidden behind newer landscaping, a stone fountain. It was smaller than it appeared in the photograph, weathered by time and Toronto's harsh winters, but unmistakably the same. Clara stood before the fountain, feeling something shift inside her. She'd found the place. Now what? The park was quiet on this Wednesday morning. A few dog walkers, a woman doing Tai Chi near the tennis courts, and on a bench near the fountain, an elderly man tossing breadcrumbs to a gathering of pigeons. He wore a gray wool coat despite the mild temperature, and a blue scarf that might once have been vibrant but had faded to the color of old denim. His hands, Clara noticed as she approached, trembled slightly with each gesture. "Excuse me," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up. His face was lined with decades of weather and worry, but his eyes were kind, pale blue, watery with age but alert. "Yes?" Clara pulled the wallet from her bag. "I found this yesterday. At a bus stop downtown. I think it might mean something here." The man's face went completely still. For a moment Clara thought he might not have heard her, but then she saw his expression change, surprise, then recognition, then something deeper and more complicated. His trembling hands reached out slowly, almost reverently, to take the wallet. He opened it with infinite care, as if it might shatter. When he saw the photograph, his breath caught, an audible intake of air that spoke of pain so old it had become part of him. A tear, then another, rolled down his weathered cheeks. "This was my son's," he whispered. Clara felt her own throat tighten. She sat down beside him on the bench, giving him space but staying close enough to listen. "His name was Michael," the old man continued, his voice gaining strength. "He was 8 in that picture. Loved paper airplanes. Used to make them out of everything, homework, newspapers, napkins at restaurants. His mother and I were always finding paper airplanes in the strangest places." He traced the photograph with one finger, touching the boy's face as if trying to reach across the years. "This park was his favorite. We lived just 2 blocks away, in a house that's been torn down now. Apartments there instead. We'd come here every Sunday. I'd bring bread for the pigeons, and Michael would fly his airplanes. He said he was training to be a pilot." The old man paused, looking out across the park as if seeing it differently, seeing it as it was, as it had been. "He got sick when he was 9. Leukemia. Back then, treatments weren't what they are now. He fought for 3 years, brave as any soldier. But in the end, he didn't need to finish." Clara understood. "I'm so sorry," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. 15 years ago this November," the man said. 15 years, and I still come here. Every week. Sometimes more." He looked at Clara then, really looked at her. "And once a month, I leave this wallet. On different benches, different bus stops. Always with the note, always with Michael's picture." Clara felt pieces clicking into place. "You're testing people," she said. "Seeing if anyone will care enough to return it." "Not testing," he corrected gently. "Hoping. There's a difference. I'm not trying to catch people being bad. I'm trying to prove they can still be good." He held the wallet close to his chest, as if warming something that had been cold too long. "After Michael died, I lost faith. Not in God exactly, though that too for a while. I lost faith in people. In goodness. The world suddenly seemed so cruel, so random. Why would a child suffer? Why would a bright light be snuffed out for no reason? His voice was steady now, stronger. My wife Sarah, she passed 5 years ago, cancer. She used to tell me that Michael's kindness lived on in the world. That goodness doesn't die, it just transforms. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't feel it. So I started this ritual, I suppose. I'd place the wallet somewhere public and wait. Sometimes for hours, watching from a distance. Has anyone ever returned it before? Clara asked that he shook his head. A few times people picked it up, looked inside, then put it back. Once someone took it and I never saw it again, had to have a new one made. But you're the first to bring it here. The first to follow the trail. He looked at her with something like wonder. How did you know? Clara explained, the library, the photograph's background, the street sign. But honestly, she admitted, I almost didn't. I almost just turned it in to Lost and Found, or ignored it completely. I've been feeling so disconnected lately, so tired of trying to see good in people when all I see is the opposite. The old man nodded slowly. Then perhaps we needed each other today. They sat together in silence for a moment, watching the pigeons scatter and return, scatter and return. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the grass. What was he like? Clara asked. Michael, I mean. The old man smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Curious about everything. Asked a million questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do pigeons sleep? How do airplanes stay up? We'd go to the library every week and come home with stacks of books. He chuckled. He wanted to understand how things worked, but more than that, he wanted to understand why things mattered. He'd ask me, Papa, why is it important to be nice to people? Not how, but why. I'd tell him because it makes the world better, and he'd ask, but how do you know? Always pushing deeper. He sounds like my students, Clara said. They ask the hardest questions. The ones adults have stopped asking because we don't have good answers. What do you tell them? I tell them the truth, that kindness matters because we decide it matters. That goodness exists because we choose to create it, every day, in small ways. That we're not kind because we expect rewards, we're kind because that's how we want the world to be. The old man looked at her with sudden intensity. You're a teacher. 3rd grade. Oak Street Elementary. Michael would have liked you. He held up the wallet. This was actually his idea, in a way. Near the end, when he was in the hospital, he made me promise something. He said, Papa, promise you'll look for the good people. Promise you won't forget they exist. I said I would, and he said, you have to prove it. You have to go looking. So that's what I've been doing. Looking for proof that his faith was justified. Clara felt tears on her own cheeks now. I think he'd be proud of you. I think he'd be proud of you, the man countered. You found an empty wallet in the rain and didn't just walk past. You spent your own time, your own effort, following a cryptic message because you thought it might matter. That's the kind of person Michael believed in. He carefully placed the wallet in his coat pocket. My name is Robert, by the way. Robert Chin. I've been rude, not introducing myself properly. Clara Bennett. And you weren't rude, just processing something important. Robert stood up slowly, using the bench for support. Clara Bennett, would you like to walk with an old man for a bit? I'd like to show you something. They walked through the park together, Robert setting a slow pace that matched his age, Clara adjusting naturally to his rhythm. He pointed out places as they went, that's where we'd have picnics. Sarah would make sandwiches and Michael would try to share them with the pigeons, which she absolutely hated. And there, see that oak tree? Michael tried to climb it once, got about 4 feet up and froze. I had to talk him down. He cried about it, said he'd let me down. I told him courage isn't never being afraid, it's trying despite the fear. They reached the edge of the park where it met Queen Street. Across the road was a small storefront, its windows displaying children's books and toys. That used to be a Chinese bakery, Robert said. Michael loved their egg tarts. We'd come every Saturday, and Mrs. Wong would slip him an extra one when she thought I wasn't looking. I always was, but I never said anything. Those small kindnesses, they meant everything. He turned to Clara. The world tells us to rush, to focus on big achievements, big gestures. But kindness isn't big. It's small and quiet. It's noticing the wallet. It's spending an evening searching. It's sitting with an old man on a bench while he tells stories about a son who's been gone 15 years. It's leaving a wallet once a month, Clara added, hoping someone will care. Yes, Robert agreed. That too. They stood together at the park's edge, watching the city move past, cars and cyclists and pedestrians, everyone going somewhere, everyone caught in their own urgent narratives. Clara thought about her students, about the essays still ungraded in her bag, about the small moments of grace that happened in her classroom every day. A child sharing crayons. Another helping sound out a difficult word. The way they naturally, instinctively, looked out for each other until adults taught them to compete instead. I've been so tired, Clara admitted quietly. I've been starting to believe that kindness is losing. That the world is getting harder, colder. That caring about people is becoming obsolete. Robert was quiet for a moment. A month after Michael died, I wanted to die too. Not actively, I wasn't going to do anything, but I stopped caring whether I woke up each morning. Sarah was grieving too, but differently. She started volunteering at the hospital where Michael was treated, reading to sick children. I thought she was crazy. How could she go back there? But she said the only way to honor Michael's light was to shine for other children in the dark. He paused, his voice growing softer. She was right. The darkness exists, there's no denying that. But it exists precisely because the light matters so much. You can't have shadow without light. The fact that cruelty hurts us so deeply is proof that kindness is our natural state. We're wounded by meanness because we're built for compassion. Clara felt something loosening in her chest, some tight knot of cynicism beginning to unravel. So what do we do? How do we keep believing? We look for proof, Robert said simply. Like I've been doing with the wallet. We create small tests not to catch people failing, but to witness them succeeding. We notice when someone holds a door, when they let you merge in traffic, when they return what's lost. And we do the same. We be the proof we're looking for. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the wallet again. I'm going to leave this somewhere new next month. Maybe someone else will find it. Maybe they won't bring it back. But maybe they will, and that possibility, that hope, is what keeps me coming to this park, feeding these pigeons, believing that Michael's light is still somewhere in the world. What if no one finds it? Clara asked. What if it just sits there, or someone takes it without caring what it means? Then I'll leave it again the next month. And the month after that. Because the point isn't whether everyone is kind, it's that anyone can be. You proved that today, Clara. You could have walked past that bench. You could have glanced at the wallet and kept going. You could have taken it home, looked at the photo, said, "How sad," and thrown it away. But you didn't. You cared enough to search, to invest your time and energy in something that offered you nothing but the chance to do right by a stranger. They stood together a moment longer, then Robert held out his hand. Clara shook it, feeling the tremor in his fingers, the papery texture of age-worn skin, and beneath it, the strength of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Thank you, Robert said, for proving it still exists. What? Clara asked, though she knew. Kindness. Hope. The thing Michael believed in until his last breath, that people are fundamentally good if you give them the chance to show it. Clara watched him walk slowly back toward the fountain, back to his bench and his pigeons and his weekly vigil. She thought about calling after him, asking for his phone number, suggesting they meet for coffee. But somehow that felt wrong, like trying to possess something that was meant to be fleeting. She'd been given a gift today, not a relationship. The gift of witnessing someone's grief transformed into hope, and of being the proof he'd been searching for. She took out her phone and snapped a picture of the park, the fountain, the bench where Robert now sat. Not for social media or to prove anything to anyone else, but for herself. To remember this moment when her faith in humanity had been quietly, unexpectedly restored. That evening, Clara finally graded her students' essays about heroes. She read them differently now, noticing not just grammar and structure but the content. Who these third graders considered heroic: firefighters and doctors, yes, but also a grandmother who made the best dumplings, a crossing guard who knew everyone's name, a neighbor who'd helped them find a lost cat. Small heroes performing small acts that meant everything to the people they touched. She wrote her comments carefully, adding more than corrections. Your grandmother sounds wonderful. Kindness is definitely a superpower. I'm so glad Mr. Johnson helped you find Whiskers. People who help without being asked are the best kind of heroes. It sounds like Mrs. Parker really sees you. Being seen and known is one of the most important gifts we can give each other. The next Monday, she told her class about a wallet she'd found. She changed some details, made it a lost library card instead, simplified the search, but kept the essential truth. I could have just walked past it, she said. Most people did. But I thought about how I'd feel if I lost something important, and I decided to try to return it. 23 small faces looked up at her with that uncomplicated attention children give to stories that matter. Did you find them? Asked Marcus, who always asked the questions everyone else was thinking. I did, Clara said. And it turned out they weren't expecting anyone to look. They'd almost given up hope that anyone would care. But when I returned it, I could see something change in their face. Like I'd given them back more than just their lost item, I'd given them back their faith that good people exist. Are you a hero? Asked Sophia, who always needed things stated explicitly. Clara thought about Robert, about Michael, about the wallet still making its monthly rounds through Toronto. No, she said honestly. I just did what anyone should do. But maybe that's the point. We can all be heroes in small ways. We can all be the person who doesn't walk past. We can all be proof that kindness still lives. She didn't tell them about the note, return this to where kindness still lives, but she thought about it often in the weeks that followed. She thought about it when she stopped to help an elderly woman with her groceries, when she let a harried mother go ahead of her in line, when she complimented a student who clearly needed encouragement that day. Small acts. Small proofs. Small ways of answering the question Robert had been asking the city for 15 years, does kindness still exist? Will anyone prove it? The weeks turned to months. Toronto moved into its winter rhythm, snow and ice, short days, and long nights, the city bundled against the cold. Clara found herself thinking about Robert occasionally, wondering if he was still visiting the park in this weather, still feeding pigeons through the snow, still leaving the wallet for strangers to find. In January, on a particularly bitter afternoon, Clara took a different route home from school. She found herself on Queen Street, near Bellwoods Park, and on impulse she walked in. The fountain was covered for winter, the trees bare against the gray sky. But there, on his bench, bundled in what looked like several coats and that same faded blue scarf, was Robert. He looked up as she approached, and his face broke into a smile of recognition. Clara Bennett. The teacher. Mr. Chin. Still conducting your research? He chuckled. Every week. Though I have to admit, in this cold, the pigeons are less interested in my bread. She sat beside him. Did anyone else find it? The wallet? Once, he said. Young man brought it to the park about 3 weeks after you did. He was nervous, said he'd almost ignored it, but his daughter had asked him what was in his hand, and when he showed her the photo, she'd insisted they figure out where it belonged. Children have a clarity adults lose, don't they? They do, Clara agreed, thinking of her third grader's simple certainty about right and wrong. What brings you here on such a cold day? Clara wasn't entirely sure. I think I needed to see the place again. To remember. Remember what? That it's worth trying. That people can still surprise you. That kindness isn't dead, just hidden sometimes beneath all the rushing and worrying and self-protection. Robert nodded slowly. Michael used to say that people are like paper airplanes. They want to fly, to go somewhere good, but they need the right conditions. Wind, space, someone to launch them properly. Maybe that's what kindness is, creating conditions for people to be their best selves. They sat together as snow began to fall, light flakes that caught in Robert's gray hair and melted on Clara's cheeks. The park was nearly empty, just the two of them and the patient pigeons and the city moving past beyond the trees. I've been thinking about starting something, Clara said suddenly. A project with my students. Teaching them about small kindnesses. Not in a preachy way, but practically. What it looks like to notice people, to help without being asked, to be proof that good exists. Michael would love that, Robert said softly. I'd like to tell them about him, if that's okay. Not the sad parts necessarily, but about his curiosity, his questions about why kindness matters. About the paper airplanes. Robert's eyes filled with tears, but he was smiling. I can't think of anything that would make me happier. His light continuing, moving through your students out into the world. He paused. Would you like to meet Sarah? At the cemetery, I mean. I visit every Sunday. I think she'd like to know about you, about what you're doing. And so began an unexpected friendship, not constant or demanding, but present. Clara would sometimes join Robert at the park or the cemetery, and he would tell her stories about Michael and Sarah. In return, she'd share stories about her students, about the small kindnesses she witnessed every day in her classroom. The project she'd mentioned grew into something real. Once a month, her class would perform a kindness experiment, returning lost items, helping neighbors, leaving encouraging notes in library books. They documented it not for credit or praise, but to remind themselves that goodness compounds, that small acts ripple outward in ways we can't always see. And once, on a mild day in early spring, Clara brought her entire class to Bellwoods Park. Robert was there, as she knew he would be, feeding his pigeons. The children sat in a semicircle around him, and he told them about a boy who loved paper airplanes and asked difficult questions and believed, until his last moment, that people were fundamentally good. Your teacher proved my son right, Robert told them. She found something lost and cared enough to return it. And now all of you have the chance to do the same, not just with objects, but with hope. Every time you're kind, you're returning hope to someone who might have lost it. Every time you notice someone who's struggling and help them, you're proving that Michael's faith was justified. That afternoon, 23 third graders made paper airplanes and launched them across the park, watching them soar and dip and spiral, each one a small act of flight, each one carrying the simple message that kindness still lives, that goodness still exists, that we can still choose to be the proof the world is searching for. If you ever find something lost, return it. You might be returning more than an object. You might be returning hope. You might be proving that kindness still lives. And in a world that sometimes forgets to believe in goodness, that proof might be the most important thing you'll ever give. Be the proof. Be StoryWise.